So, I didn't think I'd be back here so soon, let alone with a part 2 even. When I first started this, I never expected to fall as deep down into this rabbit hole as I did. As it turns out, after making my previous discovery, I really had just only begun to scratch the surface of something amazing. Since then, I've uncovered something atop the lost media iceberg that I never imagined I'd ever get this close to. And if not for part 1 of this series, all of this would have never even been possible. Guys, I found the Mean Girls DS game.
My hairline's weird. My pores are huge.
My nail beds suck.
Is that the new girl?
Based on the 2004 coming-of-age cult classic, Paramount Digital Entertainment and Crush Digital Media presents Mean Girls for the Nintendo DS. You play as 16-year-old... Oh my god, Katie Heron? You play as 16-year-old Katie Heron, new student to North Shore High. Formerly homeschooled and recently transferred out of Africa, Katie finds herself initiated into a whole new type of jungle, Girl World.
So if you're from Africa, why are you white?
With the help of newfound friends Damien and Janice, infiltrate and take down the popular Mean Girl clique, known as the Plastics, by means of major strategic sabotage.
She doesn't even go here!
Test your skills by completing challenges with the mathletes, finding the right moves to Jingle Bell Rock, wooing the most popular guy at North Shore High, all while scooping up intel on your biggest frenemies. And remember, on Wednesdays, we wear pink.
And I want my pink shirt back!
Mean Girls, only on the Nintendo DS.
I bet right about now you're expecting some kind of fake out. You're thinking maybe someone will leap out from behind the scenes to tell you that this is all just a ruse and that you've been clickbaited for a small amount of ad revenue. Well, if I was in your position on the other side of the screen, that probably would have been my first inclination too. In fact, that feeling is probably comparable to how I felt when I was staring in disbelief at my inbox only a few days after publishing my last video. For those of you who need the Cliff Notes, a couple months back, I set out to find the illustrious cancelled Mean Girls DS game, a title announced all the way back in 2008 that eventually never saw the light of day. Shrouded in so much controversy and mystique, I made it my mission to solve the mystery of this lost media title. However, my efforts ended up taking me on a different trail. I scoured all the corners of the internet looking for anyone who could provide me with more information, and in my attempt to deconstruct deconstruct the mystery behind the Mean Girls DS game, I wound up uncovering a second piece of lost media with a striking amount of similarities to Mean Girls that I never expected to find while on my journey. A full working ROM file of another cancelled and lost title known as Clueless Fashion for the Nintendo DS, along with an entire dump of game assets that included all of the files that went into the making of this game, such as the game style guide, lot check, game design document, all neatly packaged within a drive file by some brave anonymous source. Old lost media had finally been secured and shared with the rest of the world. And while I wasn't able to retrieve what I had initially set out to look for, the prize waiting for me at the end of the tunnel was definitely worth the journey. But unfortunately, that neat little summary doesn't do the hour-long video much justice, as it's more of an experience than anything else. So if you haven't seen it yet and want to be taken on a wild ride of highs, lows, and everything in between, give that video a watch before proceeding with part 2. I promise you won't be disappointed. And now that you're all caught up with the backstory, we can finally continue where we left off. Hi! It's me again, somehow already smack dab in the middle of another unimaginable find. While working on the documentary, I had sought out a handful of developers who had been working at Crush Digital Media, Fuzzy Frog, and Mayhem Games during the production of the Mean Girls DS game, in the hopes that someone would reach out. While someone was able to provide some answers to a few of my burning questions I'd mentioned in the previous video, shortly after the documentary was released, more sources came flooding in, and what I was about to learn would jumpstart my quest in tracking down the elusive ROM I sought out to find nearly 6 months ago. Through the passing months, I continued sending out emails to various employees who had at some point in time worked at Crush Digital Media, Fuzzy Frog, and Mayhem Games, all of the studios that we now know were involved in the production of the Mean Girls DS game. Of the many contacts I had reached out to, not long after posting my latest video, a new source had responded and was able to provide all new information and never before released details on the Mean Girls DS game. Hi, I saw you were involved in the creation of the cancelled Mean Girls title for the Nintendo DS and was reaching out to see if you'd be willing to answer some questions regarding its production.
Hi Raven, sure thing. Some answers to your questions below. Have a good weekend. Thanks.
The first person I came into contact with, more specifically, was able to provide additional information on a handful of minigames that were in the DS game, along with providing extra in-game images independent from the screenshots that had found their way online a few years prior. And to make things a little less confusing moving forward, as this individual had requested to remain anonymous, I'm going to be referring to them as Devin. And the conversation between Devin and I went a little something like this. There had been a few dates circulating online for the release of this title, being September of 2009 and April of 2010. Do you remember what the official scheduled release date for Mean Girls DS was intended to be?
I'm afraid not. It's going back a fair way now, so I couldn't tell you when it was scheduled to be released.
Some people claim to have seen this game in stores. Do you know if the Mean Girls game was actually released to retailers, or had it not passed that stage?
When Crush went into administration, I recall that the game was pretty close to being finished, and we were in the process of fixing bugs and balancing the minigames. Because the development was passed to 2 more developers after Crush, maybe it missed its window and the market had moved on.
I've attached some screenshots in this email. Do they look familiar? Can you provide any more information about these minigames?
Yeah, there was a fireworks game where you had to create big chain reactions of fireworks to get the bigger scores. I guess you could think of it as a simple version of Every Extend Extra. It would appear when there was a school event or celebration in the story. It would evolve each time it appeared to present a different challenge. So clouds would appear and get in the way, the location would change and obscure different parts of the sky. I remember that one being fun. I remember the art from that dancing game, but not much else. It was based on the Jingle Rock section from the film and was some sort of rhythm action game, but I can't remember the player's interaction at all. I remember the air hockey game, and I remember it being fun, but I can't remember why we would put it in a Mean Girls game. Smile. No recollection of that dot-to-dot game at all. That last picture was a good one. You would throw paper airplanes at the students while the teacher wasn't looking. The aim was to get the students to turn around and time it so the teacher would see them not paying attention, so you would get them in trouble. There was a nice flick mechanic, so it was a bit like playing those darts games you could get on the DS. I vaguely recall there was a dressing up game where you had to dress characters appropriately for different parties. I think the character would request an outfit and you would have to sort it out. A bit like those cooking games where a character asks for a particular meal and you have to make it in the shortest time for more points. There was also a hidden object game where you were effectively tidying up after a party.
If the game was not released, how do you suppose the screenshots managed to find their way online? Were these taken from the now defunct Crush Digital Media website as part of promotion?
I think, because the game was pretty much done and in its closing stages, the publisher had started up their marketing machine, so screenshots would have appeared on news sites, press releases sent out, etc. Crush closing down probably put a spanner in that works, though.
Game preservationists everywhere are dying to get their hands on a physical copy of this game. Are you, by any chance, in possession of the official ROM?
No, unfortunately not.
Do you know of anyone else on the team who would be interested in shedding more light on this?
Not really. Sorry.
Lastly, are there any files you might be willing to share, whether it be concept art, the user manual, game design documents, back box art, or any related documents you feel comfortable disclosing?
I haven't really got any files to share. I do have a few in-game screenshots in hand, but that's about it.
Devin proceeded to share 4 separate screenshots from the Mean Girls DS game, unique to the ones that had been leaked online. These images haven't been seen by anyone outside of the company until today. The first image is what appears to be Lindsay Lohan's character Katie, standing outside of North Shore High having a conversation with her parents who can also be seen in the background. The caption on the side is a quote from Katie that reads, "You're not going to be one of those moms who cries when they drop their kid off at school, are you?" This screenshot suggests that some segments of the game would have been required to be played and viewed horizontally on its side, as opposed to the standard vertical orientation seen in earlier leaked screenshots. In the second image, the school's principal, known as Mr. Duval, can be seen hanging out inside of his office. The text on the side reads, "Ah, Katie, I'm glad to see you're researching the wildlife of North Shore High." The third screenshot is of a map that appears to be the main overview of the game, possibly the navigation or menu screen. It seems to be a map of the entire school sitting inside of what I could only presume to be a large burn book. This is also viewed on a horizontal axis, similar to the first screenshot of the characters outside of the school. The fourth and final image that was shared with me was a screenshot of a conversation between the player and Janice Ian, with Regina George, Gretchen Wieners, and Karen Smith all standing in the background at what appears to be the school's playing field. The text on the left reads, "That's Regina George. How can I describe her without getting expelled? I guess I can't." After months of searching, someone out there was finally able to disclose some previously unreleased information. All of my inquiries were bringing me to what felt like inches closer to uncovering a full ROM of the Mean Girls game. At this point, someone out there had to know more about this. I just wasn't convinced that this was the end of my journey. I mean, I already made such a huge find with just these screenshots alone. As it turns out of sheer dumb luck, the documentary I'd posted had somehow become the catalyst for people in the community to start talking. Word got around, and eventually the video had been seen by individuals with even closer ties to the Mean Girls project. And all this talk was happening right under my nose. While I sat there, ecstatic that I made a breakthrough, but also feeling like I'd hit another wall, as only one person had successfully responded to my inquiries, I unknowingly sent out a signal, and rather than chasing down anyone connected to the Mean Girls game, the Mean Girls had literally found me. The previous video had subsequently caught the eye of a very important player in this final chapter. It had opened up the floodgates for more communication, and on March 28th at 9:27 a.m., I would wake up to a surprising new revelation sitting inside of my inbox. A correspondence from an anonymous sender with the subject of the email reading, "Mean Girls DS."
Hey Raven, I was sent a link this week to your Mean Girls investigative video by an anonymous source. It's a great piece of work. Of all the games from my career to get the documentary treatment, I wouldn't have expected it to be that one. For such a now old and obscure game, you managed to uncover a lot of information. Normally, I wouldn't talk about the past projects, NDAs and all that, but in this case, it feels that I am able to perhaps offer you a satisfying conclusion. If I remember correctly, these games were made at the end of the DS's popularity, when mini-game compilations with attached brands were all the rage. Crush was in the process of developing Beauty Salon for 505 games. When we got the Mean Girls rights, we didn't really know what to do with it, so we came up with a game design and decided to go ahead. I don't think we had exclusive rights to the license, which is why a different publisher made a PC game at the same time, like how there are lots of Walking Dead games around from different companies at the moment. I can't really go into details, but considering all the pressures that were around at the time, the team involved did an awesome job of pretty much finishing Mean Girls, Beauty Salon, and Blend It. As I recall, when Crush closed, the 3 games just needed some bug fixing, so it was particularly gutting after all that work to not get to celebrate the release. I also have a vague recollection about the game cover being changed as well, but I can't remember if it was because of Lindsay Lohan's controversial behavior at the time, or whether it was because she became litigious about the use of her likeness. Anyway, the game was a narrative-driven mini-game compilation. The player would take the role of the new student and explore the school and talk to the other characters from the film. As the story progressed, you would unlock 10 mini-games, but each one could be played in 3 different ways to present different challenges. The games were a bit hit and miss, but we were under so much time pressure that there wasn't really time to iterate and get them perfect. They all worked and were fun to some degree, but they weren't very polished. You could also click around the school scenes to find bonus stars, so there was the bonus hidden object game to fill the gaps. The ultimate aim was to fill the burn book by collecting all the stickers during the story. We made the burn book the hub of the game, so it filled out as the game progressed. I remember we had a fully functioning 3D prototype for the book, which was amazing, but the DS kept running out of memory, so we ended up replacing it with render movies for the pages turning, which triggered when you swiped across the screen. Worked out well in the end. Simpler is sometimes better. To better get that book feeling across, the game was played with the DS turned on its side, which was a nice touch. So now the punchline. Please find attached a link to a Google Drive folder that contains the DS ROM for the game. I would appreciate it if you didn't share the ROM publicly, but perhaps consider making a gameplay video to share it instead. Let me know when you've got the ROM, and I'll remove it from my Google Drive. I have shared it to your email address, so you may have got a message about that recently.
Sitting at the bottom of the email was a direct link to a drive folder titled meangirls.nds.
Any questions, give me a shout. Best, Anonymous.
My early skepticism was short-lived and quickly replaced with a strong feeling of elation. Could any of this be real? Was this a legitimate copy of the ROM? Or was it just someone really dedicated to trolling me? I had to find out for myself. So with both fingers crossed, I dragged it into a Nintendo DS emulator and hoped for the best. And the funny thing is, it turned out to be everything I could have ever hoped for. First, the dual screen fades to white, displaying the Licensed by Nintendo text, and what follows are both the logos for Crush Digital Media and 505 Games. What can be seen next is a video clip of the classic Paramount Pictures logo sequence, and after that, I pretty much had a heart attack when the screen read, Paramount Pictures presents Mean Girls. It felt like a literal fever dream. I was watching Lost Media unfold right before my very eyes. This was, without a doubt, the official Mean Girls DS ROM. In an unbelievable turn of events, I had been anonymously gifted the Mean Girls Nintendo DS game. But little did I know, unraveling the rest of this was about to get much more complex from here on out. Let me explain. As excited as I am to proceed with my findings, as mentioned earlier, I unfortunately can't share the original ROM file for the community, out of respect for the anonymous sender's wishes. I can, however, share a recording of the full gameplay. Yes, others wouldn't get the chance to experience playing the game firsthand, but on the bright side, they would finally be able to witness the game in its entirety by proxy, however it may be, which is a viewing experience that many people in the Lost Media community have dreamed about ever since the search for this missing game began, and I'm happy to be the person to bring that forward. So all wasn't lost, or so I thought. In my attempt to record the gameplay, I soon came to realize that this would come with its own set of complications, which I'll be addressing later on in this video. But before we can make our way to this crucial find, I ask that you please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and if you can, please consider following my other social pages listed here that I'll be leaving in the description box of this video. Making videos of this caliber, while I really enjoy it, is also a pretty painstakingly long process, and I want to be able to keep making content similar to this. The more support and visibility this channel gets, the more I'll be able to make these frequent and in-depth documentaries. So please make sure to subscribe and click the bell to turn notifications on if you haven't done so already. It really helps to support the channel and keeps you up to date with all the new releases. And with that out of the way, I'd like to formally introduce you to the Mean Girls DS game. I'll be breaking this down into two sections: how to play the game, where I give a basic rundown of the in-game mechanics, along with a full playthrough and chapter summary with never before seen footage from the game. Please enjoy. On the main menu screen, players can flip through the following options: Story mode, which contains the main story and playthrough, a free play mode, where you can play any of the games that have been unlocked in the story mode, and options to adjust the sound and music volumes to better suit your playing style. When starting up the story mode, you have the option of creating 4 individual save profiles. The game is played through an autosave system, marking the player's progress after each mission objective is completed. Rather than chapters, the game's progression is broken up into mission objectives, and in order to complete each objective, you must navigate your way through different locations that are marked on the map displayed inside of the burn book. As you move throughout the game and complete the many challenges, new areas of the map inside the burn book are unlocked for you to explore, with there being a total of 14 different map locations. These locations are labeled as the following: outside school, principal's office, canteen, playing fields, classroom, gym hall, Janice Ian's basement, Katie's bedroom, Katie's lounge, Aaron's lounge, Regina's house, Regina's bedroom, mall soap shop, and the mall. In addition to these mission objectives are a series of mini-games and challenges that show up with varying levels of difficulty. There are a total of 10 mini-games present that can be played on easy, medium, and hard modes. The first mini-game is known as Mathletics, where the player has to pop 3 bubbles to add the numbers. The goal of this mini-game is to try and hit the target number. The second mini-game is known as Makeup, where you're required to doll up your character for a big night on the town. The next game is called Fireworks. In this mini-game, the player has to tap the fireworks before they fall, with chain explosions adding bonus points. The fourth game is called Secrets, where the player must search for all of the items that are hidden in the scene. And the fifth is known as Air Hockey, where, simply put, the player engages in a nice game of air hockey. Fashion is the title for the sixth minigame, and it requires the player to guess the right choice of clothing in order to win. The seventh minigame, one that most are familiar with, is known as Dance. In Dance, the player has to complete the shapes in a limited amount of time. The eighth minigame is Troublemaker. The object of this game is to hit your classmates with paper airplanes without getting caught. The ninth game, known as Perfume, has the player find the correct perfume orders in a timely fashion. With the 10th and final minigame titled Aura, the player must use the stylus to draw animals in a connect-the-dot fashion to ease your friend's anxieties. Don't ask, because I have no idea. It should also be noted that much of the game in story mode is viewed on a horizontal orientation, while the mini-games are required to be played and viewed vertically, including a prompt screen that alerts the player on when to adjust their viewpoint just before the sequence begins. For bonus points, tapping on random objects throughout the town with your stylus pen will also reveal bonus stars, which you can collect in order to achieve a 100% completion rate in the game. The goal is to fill the burn book by finishing the story, collecting the stars, and also completing all of the side missions. And now that you have a basic rundown of all the mechanics present inside the game, it's time for you to know the story. So follow me as I dive into the gameplay summary for the Mean Girls DS game. The game begins with Katie being seen off to her first day of school at North Shore High by both of her parents. Katie attempts to quell her parents' concerns as they lament on how quickly she's grown up before their eyes. Once the three part ways, it leads into our first objective labeled Surviving the First Day. Surviving the first day. On your first day of school, you're approached by alternative outcast Janice and her best friend Damien. In an effort to be more familiar with the school, Katie asks the pair if they can show her around North Shore High. Janice obliges and tells Katie to meet them by the playing fields after class. This will be a location you return to quite often in order to report back to Janice and Damien after each mission. Meeting on the playing field. Once Katie meets up with Janice on the playing field, she then spots Regina George and the rest of the Plastics, Karen and Gretchen Wieners, off in the field. Curious about these girls, Janice begrudgingly responds with, "That's Regina George. How can I describe her without getting expelled? I guess I can't." Instead of outright telling her more about the Plastics, you're tasked with asking around to find out for yourself. But before you go off on your next mission, you're equipped with a journal to jot down all of the dirt and gossip that you can on Regina George. With this objective complete, the player then moves on to the next task, asking around the school to learn about the Plastics. This mission requires you to go around to all the available points on the map, talking to other students and even faculty members in order to attain more information about Regina George and the Plastics. In your search for more information, you encounter Mr. Duvall, principal of North Shore High, Kevin Kapoor, president of the Mathletes and socially awkward and self-proclaimed rapper, and the school heartthrob Aaron Samuels, who also happens to be the ex-boyfriend of Mean Girl leader Regina George. In conclusion, the general consensus from your investigation is that most people don't seem to have very many good things to say. Aside from the Plastics being teen royalty, they aren't very well liked because of their bad attitude, and Katie is advised to befriend them with caution. Returning to the playing field, Katie now has a full understanding of where Janice's animosity for the Plastics stems from. Janice encourages Katie to branch out and meet all of the cliques that exist within the school. The cafeteria is the best place to start looking. Get to know all the cliques in the school. While in the cafeteria, you learn about the nerds and the jocks. Before you leave, you run into Regina George and are invited to eat lunch with her and the rest of the Plastics tomorrow in the cafeteria. There's a few rules though if you want to be seen hanging out with Regina, with the first two being, 1, you can't wear a tank top 2 days in a row, and 2, you can only wear your hair in a ponytail once a week. There are actually a lot more rules set by the Plastics, and if any of those rules are broken, well, you can't sit with them. Katie reluctantly accepts. Return to Janice and Damien. Once at the playing field, Katie gives Janice and Damien the inside scoop on her encounter with Regina George. Katie is still not entirely convinced that Regina has any malicious intent inviting her to her group, despite Janice's warnings. The conversation is cut short when Damien remarks on his disdain for Miss Norbury's math class. He refers to it as a snooze fest. Katie, however, remarks that she loves it, as math is the same in every language. Damien thinks that this makes Katie deep, and with math class about to start, a new objective is created. Get to Norbury's class. Upon late arrival, Katie is greeted by Miss Norbury. She apologizes for her tardiness, and the first minigame begins, known as Mathletics. In Mathletics, players must combine 3 bubbles to add the numbers up. Stars are given if you can get the 3 bubbles to hit the target number on the left side of the screen, and time is lost if the player goes over the target number. The main objective is to try and rack up a high score. After successfully piecing together an adequate string of numbers, thus completing the first minigame, the screen goes black. I waited a little bit and it stayed black after that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we hit our first problem. The one I had mentioned earlier. Yeah, the Mean Girls DS game had a bit of a glitch. Immediately, I thought back to my conversation with Devin. I vaguely remember him mentioning that before the game's cancellation, the team was in the process of fixing bugs and balancing out all of the mini-games. Since Mean Girls had been scrapped mid-development, with the first bug so early into the game, I could only assume that the game hadn't been thoroughly debugged, and the odds of it containing more glitches like this were pretty high. At this point, even though I managed to get as close as I did, I felt a little bit defeated. So I decided the only way around this was to take matters into my own hands and try to crack the code myself. And I got absolutely nowhere. Well, Okay, not nowhere. I did somehow manage to extract all of the music available in the game with the limited knowledge I had thanks to the help of modding software and 10-year-old YouTube tutorials. To my surprise though, the Mean Girls DS game only contained a total of 4 songs. The first was titled Music Dancing. This track would have most likely played during the Jingle Bell Rock minigame. The remainder of the tracks were listed as Music Mean Girls Theme 1, 2, and 3. In the gameplay I managed to uncover, it seems that Theme 1 is used for the overworld and menu, while Theme 2 was made specifically for the minigames. As for the usage of Theme 3, that was still unknown. This was all I was able to extract, and if you'd like to listen for yourself, I'll be posting all 4 tracks to my YouTube channel in the days leading up to the release of this video. Mining the music for this game seemed to be a relatively simple task, but without any basic knowledge of coding, and with everything I was reading only adding to my confusion, my head began to spin. I felt like I was playing a really complex game of operation and I couldn't surmise exactly what fit where. The ROM was an adequate file size, so it's not as if the game was incomplete. I just wasn't able to reach the rest of it. On top of that, it's not like I could really share the game publicly, so I didn't have very many options. What could I really do? I was beginning to grow desperate. In a last-ditch effort to debug the Mean Girls DS game, I was put in touch with a programmer. I told him my dilemma and asked for his help under the condition that I pay him a visit with the ROM on a USB. That way I could guarantee that the file wouldn't fall in another's possession. And this seemed like the perfect solution, but as you know, the timing was kind of off.
Oh man, Raven, I'd love to help, but with what's going on in the world right now, the timing just isn't right. I'll see what I can do a month from now once everything clears up.
He was right. I didn't want to risk anyone's health and safety. Maybe in time, once everything's cleared up, we'll be able to get back to work. This was the bit that was unfortunately totally out of my hands. But when that day happens, I'll be back here, I promise. But for now, this story ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. With the Mean Girls game fully in my possession, there really isn't that much left that can be said about this mystery. This game, without a doubt, does exist, and I've got the file to prove it. The only thing stopping me from closing the lid on this entirely is the lack of full gameplay. Without that, I can't truly be 100% complete. But for now, all we have is a very limited glimpse of what the game actually looks like. Unless, of course, someone else is able to provide a full working and debugged ROM file. And while I wasn't able to uncover an entire playthrough, I hope what was shared today brings some sort of comfort to lost media enthusiasts that had completely lost hope on this game's existence and quelled any skepticisms that this game would ever find its way online. I just know that if I can get into contact with a trusted programmer or a trusted figure in the lost media community who can help to debug the Mean Girls ROM and unlock the rest of this game, we may very well have ourselves a full playthrough that can finally be shared with the public. And once that day comes, I promise you, it will be a single upload to my channel titled Mean Girls DS Full Gameplay and nothing more. No theatrics, just the main prize.
The truth was